apologies because my phone is slowly but surely getting limited in storage space, and this has happened since I started creating videos. So I'm gonna have to eventually move on to my photography camera, which I have, but it's just easier to do these. Yeah, so I'll figure it out when I get there. Nonetheless, I guess let's dive back into what I was saying. So what I was saying last was what it has been is a master branding, right? That is what America has done. It has branded itself, it's marketed itself as something that it has truly never been. And actually, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues from my prior job, and something that I was just like, I've always come across this with a lot of people, not actually just, I think everyone has this idea of what certain countries and group, and you know, there's a lot of stereotypes, beliefs, ideas. Like one thing that one of my girlfriends from Saudi Arabia had, girlfriends I call my friends, my girly friends, you know. So old school term. I think it is an old school term, but something that she brought to my attention was that she felt that a lot of individuals, especially here in the US, I think Justin Bieber at some point went to Saudi Arabia, was like surprised that it wasn't like a desert, and I was just like, yeah, you know, I feel bad. I mean, are we surprised though? Like, I just mentioned this in my previous video where America is not very, the US is not very knowledgeable. It's in regards to much of the world. I think that's why there's a lot of xenophobia. We're seeing that happen, where even like white people are not even kind to their fellow cousin from Europe. Let's keep it brother from Europe, sister from Europe. And it's just like, it's a representation of the air, and I feel like this has existed for a long time. Like, there's always this fear mongering, there's always these ideas and beliefs, especially ideas and beliefs hinged on negative perceptions of other parts of the world, and we see them repeated, right? Where it's just like, oh, I thought this and that about that country. And I guess going back to the conversation I had with a prior colleague, was that she brought something up that I also was like, yeah, that's something that I've noticed a lot with a lot of friends that I've made from around the world, where, especially if they're living through not the best of situations, they will often say, you know, if I was in America or if I was in the US, I would be wealthy or rich or whatnot. It's like people that are born here, like people that are born and raised here, people that have had multiple generations, have struggled, have had difficulties. Like, it is very, I feel like there is this idea that is sold, and it's, you know, the US has no one to blame but themselves when they see like, oh my gosh, there's so many immigrants coming to this country, and it's just like, maybe you should not be marketing yourself as this idyllic place, as this place that it has never been, will never be. It's really your fault for doing that, for selling an illusion. It's a dream, right? And people say you have to sleep to believe it. So yeah, perhaps start there, and then no one will want to come. I think no one. I feel like people are coming into that, where they're realizing, like, the world is realizing, and I think a lot of people often think these very things, like these European countries, these places in these locations that are run and they're in power, those in power, naturally that's the continent that they're from, you know. It is, that's where they're at. That's, you know, there's just but that's that in itself, and I mentioned that in the previous video, where it's just like, I can't even imagine what it is like to be a person of color in a place where they themselves, that's where they are primarily at, they're located. It's already difficult, right, being here in the US or being in other countries or places. I've seen a couple videos, most recently, especially with some individuals. They are of immigrant backgrounds, black and brown, and it's like they've experienced racism in Canada, right? So it's like these places have been colonized. They've already have those issues, which are in predominantly like black, like brown, black, like whatever, regions that are made up of people of color. These are already problematic. How much more are European countries? And it's until individuals go there, until people live and experience those places, it's like, oh, yeah, they're not what they're hyped up to be, and they have never, right? If we really understand the history of these countries, these places, I feel like more people would be less inclined to go to these countries and places. So yeah, there's that. I wanted to say that much. So what it has been is a master of branding, right? And this is something that these countries and places, yet they want no immigrants. Yet they were immigrants in this specific, and I can speak only about here, the USA. I'm not going to say that for Europe. That's why I'm like, I'm not a person that's keen or called or feels inclined to go to Europe, given the fact that, hey, if we're going to be saying, well, make America native again, if we're going to be saying we're upholding the black and brown community, and we recognize who the true immigrant is, that being Europeans or those of European ancestry, then that perhaps is their rightful place. And I'm just like, no. I do believe that when it concerns, what happens over there is, and why I encourage many communities of color, like, maybe, and I think I had seen this in a video where it's like someone was being interviewed and they said maybe like Martin Luther King's dream is like, I have a dream, is like returning to those, and it's interesting, returning to those lands, but it's also like, I feel like returning to the land, because this country in itself was indigenous lands, and let's not forget that. So returning to the lands in terms of like what it was originally, like it was inhabited by natives, and it's crazy to me to see comments from white individuals based off like their pictures, and this is something I came across like yesterday, and it was some white individuals like, oh, we conquered these lands, therefore they're ours, which it's comical because these are the very people saying undocumented immigrants are illegal and they're breaking the law and they're doing X, Y, and Z. But it's like, your ancestors came here illegally, did a lot of illegal stuff, a lot of evil. They were essentially criminals because they terrorized communities that were here, and you don't want to recognize that. So first, it's like, it brings me back to that verse in the, if I really am just like taking a moment to reflect on my, what I grew up believing and understanding, which is, as you guys know, I have a faith background, and I just said in previous videos, like, take the sty out of your eye before you take out the sty out of your brother's eye. So that is something that the white community should really come into. Furthermore, there is also something that I came across when it concerns those comments that I saw. I was just like, Native Americans or natives came from Asia. Yet, let's remember, Native Americans were here before you, so they are the original founders. They are the ones that were here originally. They've been here for much longer than you have. So just because you came here doesn't mean you have. It's the same as what is happening in Palestine, where if we really take even a glance at like face value, we see Palestine, which is made up of, and that very region made up of people of color. Now, given the environment, given the environment, right? It's sunny there. How are individuals that are white going to thrive in a location where they're more prone to cancer, right? Um, it's like like different racial groups are in different regions because of evolution, right? We were the ones that thrived in those environments, in those types of environments. You cannot tell me that a community from Europe, what clearly, as you know, there's Ashkenazi Jews are descendants from that very region, given the fact that they don't even resemble the people around that very region. So let's take a pause right now. Let's take a pause right there. So this is where it's like, it's essentially doing the same thing as the European Jews, right? I understand that there are Sephardic Jews, which are those of Arab ancestry, but it's doing the same thing, coming into a land or place or region, saying this is where this is where you came and tried to claim and have continuously tried to claim. That is probably the reason why you're so insecure about other individuals and communities living here, because my freedoms are being threatened. What they believe their freedoms are, right? What the white community believes their freedoms are, their rightful, what they rightfully deserve, right? That's how they moved and have moved historically. They've always believed that they deserved more, and they can't even fathom what it would be like if those that were originally here, or people that resembled those that have been here originally, or the Black and brown community, were here in greater numbers. And that's also something that I just mentioned in my previous video. So yes, they feel threatened by the fact that they're in a region that is surrounded by communities of color. The numbers are numbering. So there's that, but I don't want to lose track. I don't want to derail, which I feel like I do a lot of times. I have too many points. My goodness. America sold, or has sold itself to the world as the land of free, just like it's sold the image of white people as the default good ones, right? The good people. And this was actually in the Malcolm X, something similar was on the Malcolm X movie that I watched. I mentioned that as well, where Malcolm X was asked when he was imprisoned by one of the individuals. It was like one of the leaders, or I guess of like they call it a certain, I forget, but you guys know, hopefully if you've seen it, one of the leaders from the group and movement that Malcolm X eventually joined, he had said, let's take a look at this dictionary. And he was like, let's look at the term white and let's look at the term black. And then he was like, white was associated with everything good, everything positive, and then black was associated with everything negative. And he was Malcolm X was like, this shit was like, he essentially said, this shit was like written by the white folks. he was like, don't give me this shit. Like, of course, they're going to market, they're going to sell themselves. That, when, and I was talking about this in one of the videos I was recording, which I didn't end up like posting and uploading, because I've seen a lot of videos, as you guys know, the topic of beauty and beauty standards and things that revolve that, which are, I feel like beauty standards don't necessarily affect people in only when it concerns like how you look and how you're perceived, and if you're like, not only in things like that, but it affects other facets, as we know. It affects like, how does now the dating world looks like, it impacts just like these things that relate to race and how you are, like these social constructs, technically, how the world perceives you. these are so layered because it's like, it's not only a matter of like, oh, this is who I am and it ends there. It's like, this is who I am, and now people will have often misconceived notions, perceptions, stereotypes based off what colonization, the white people, right? Those that have colonized the world, let's keep it real, those have pushed and imposed power through, and let's not forget, through the use of ammunition, through use of weapons. Okay, so they have been able and to sell an idea, right, and to market themselves, and we see that happening also with their countries marketing themselves. And what does that result in? That results in being perceived by the world in a positive light. And then we see other things, which I've spoken about in previous videos, where it's like now people pander to these locations and places. They all travel to European countries. And I did want to, I guess, like going back to what I was going to say that because I had recorded in a prior video that I didn't upload because I was like, okay, like this kind of got off track and I don't know what, like, but I want to say it in this video, because now I feel like this will bring me to that I hope, not only don't I want that to not be the reality from our brothers and sisters, black and brown brothers and sisters, I hope that our communities can be confident, right, and secure in who you are, and not allow, because once again, just how Malcolm X literally said, who wrote this? Like, and it was like a white man, right? A white man as the author of that very thing, selling an idea, selling a belief that was not true. It was true for him, it's true for for their community, right? Because it's conducive for their community. But is it true? No, it's not. But if you buy into it, it becomes a truth to you. And that being said, where, you know, we see self-hate. So I want to say this much because I feel like this was an important part of the message that I had in the prior video, is that I hope that my black and brown brothers and sisters can be confident in their skin, in their look, in their facial features, in their hair texture. I want you to remember that what the world has sold, and if many have bought into, that is not, you know, that is something that's like, okay, what I can do is inform, right? I can bring information, but we first should start with ensuring that we are secure and understand why the world thinks and moves and believes what it does, because it has been sold, it has been marketed, it has been imposed, it has been pushed, right? It has been forced. But these things are not true. And if we understand that, we understand why these systems, like, don't ever doubt yourself, don't ever question yourself. The people that have sold those ideas are not part of your community and do not look like you. They would not benefit from the idea of selling, right, or upholding the black and brown community. So therefore they're going to sell. And if you look even deeper, step beyond that, right, if we're talking about beauty and attractiveness, because I feel like beauty and attractiveness should come from within. This is why we have to stay informed. We have to check in with our hearts, because I think that's at the core of beauty. So with that being said, you have to also remember that the very people that have marketed and upheld white supremacy, Eurocentrism, all these things, colonialism, are people that don't even feel secure in themselves. Why tan if you're secure in yourself? If you're secure in yourself, right? Why try to change your color? And it's not even a color that you can achieve, right? Because as we see, when a white person tans, they turn orange, they turn red. This is not a tan. So Why be or try to be like something that you will never be, right? Unless you are insecure. So we should never try to be something we're not. You are beautiful. I want to leave that message. You are beautiful as you are. Hair texture, hair, the features, your skin tone. This is the identity of our ancestors. So let's not forget that. And even it goes further, right? There's lip injections, there's cheek injections, there's all this desire to have a certain physique, a certain body, right? That does not tell me you are secure, right? When you are trying to be, and it's as if they're trying to be black or brown. Let's keep it real. So let's remember that. Remember that. So I know that went quite off track, but everything is interconnected in this world. So I want to continue. Sometimes it feels like this country operates like a cult, which I think is pretty close to what I was just talking about. If you agree with mainstream, like the white people, you pander to their beliefs, their ideas, you uphold their beliefs and ideas, you're celebrated, right? When you uphold the white man and white women, you're celebrated, right? But if you don't, you're vilified. And yet this country claims to be the beacon of freedom. How does that make sense? I also want to highlight how many countries are labeled developing. I also want to highlight how many countries labeled as developing or as third world countries by the West are far more beautiful and fulfilling than they're given credit for. Despite the trauma of colonization, many of these nations still carry a spirit of joy, resilience, and community, things that are severely lacking in Western nations. People in these developing and third world countries, right, have what matters most: family, nature, culture, and collective care. Meanwhile, in these so-called developing countries, right, individualism reigns and community is almost non-existent. And let's not ignore how colonizers came to these lands, took everything for themselves, and never looked back to share, build, or honor the lives that were already here. It's no surprise that more and more people are rejecting the so-called American dream, a fantasy that was never meant for all of us, right? I think about people leaving, carving out freer lives in other countries. There's one YouTuber I actually follow that lives off the grid in Jamaica, and I can't lie, that life looks glorious. Yes. And I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. Nowhere is perfect. But it's the simple things that matter. It truly does. This administration's actions are clearly creating deep consequences, especially for the economy. America is made up of immigrants. Let's not forget that, white Americans, aka those of European ancestry, right? Immigrants have long been the backbone of this country, doing the labor others won't for the pay that isn't livable, right? And this is something that we also have to keep in mind with the deportations. Would these white Americans, right? Would these individuals that have these nice jobs, would they be doing all that? No, they ain't going to do no laborious job. They expect everyone else to do it. And now, as deportations increase and immigrant labor is stripped away, we're seeing workforce shortages, especially in labor-heavy sectors, right? And that's, once again, pointing to these individuals have been the bread and butter. And if we no longer have them, who will be doing them, right? And I mentioned that in the previous video. Are they expecting POCs? Something to think about. To be doing that, right? Let's keep in mind, without immigration labor, this country wouldn't function. Actually, it wouldn't even exist. What happens when education access continues to decline? As you know, education is being defunded. There's a lot of cuts being made. Critical thinking disappears, right? Desperation grows. The military, historically marketed to poor and marginalized communities, especially people of color, become the only path forward. But let's be honest, America's freedom was never intended for us. Its history has proven that. So where will the next generation of soldiers and workers come from? Is that part of why this country is adamantly anti-abortion? To force birth so there's a new supply of labor and fighters for the same elite class, many of whom are the descendants of slave owners or slave holders? Don't fall for that trap, right? Focus on your passions, so, right? They want to keep us distracted. They want to keep us fighting against one another, insulting in our communities in the communities of color, right? Insulting one another instead of uplifting one another. They want to distract us. They've been distracting us since the very beginning. Focus on your passions. Carve your own path, for my fellow brothers and sisters. And if you feel called, seek out new lands, freer lands. Our mission in life as those who've been oppressed is not to turn around and oppress others on behalf of the white man or women's greed. And I speak on oppressing others through military service, right? They're trying, the West, those in power, those at the very top, want something these countries have. That is not our calling. That is not our business. That is not something we do and believe in because we know what it is to be oppressed. We do not oppress our brothers and sisters around the world. No. Stay alert, stay informed, and don't lose sight of what liberation actually means and looks like. All right, take care. Bye.